Okay, so another lab that I've had pretty good success with, and a pretty good one for the AP classes as well, is my one for simple harmonic motion. Now, there are a lot of different ways that people do this one. It is kind of a standard one. I'm not saying that I'm making this up from scratch or it's something that you haven't heard of before. It's a simple pendulum one. And so what you'll need for this is some craft string. I'd imagine yarn could work fine, but you want something that doesn't stretch out as much, although you're going to have somewhat of a problem with it when you put some weight on it. I recommend getting a number of these little spring clips. You can get them for pretty cheap at, say, Walmart or anything like that. Keep them around. They're really useful for connecting, say, string like this to other things. You'll see them in some of the equipment that I use, and I'll try and point them out whenever I do. Now, one of the things that I've actually done with this, in fact, let me take you through it. So I've got the string, and what I've done is I set it out on a piece of table with a meter stick, and I actually put a little flag. Let's hope that this is still pretty good. Yeah. It'll stretch out a little bit under its weight, so keep that in mind, and you might come up with a better way than I have, but this has worked pretty well. That this is about 1 meter away from it gives you an idea of how long the pendulum is. And then the next one here is at 1.5 meters. Now, one of the things to keep in mind on this is when you measure it out level on a table, that's where that stretchiness of the string actually comes in, and you can end up with it getting noticeably longer, which can throw off some of your results. You are welcome to go through and try and refine this a lot more. But the nice thing about this, and I'll show you the setup on the ceiling in just a moment, it's one of my favorite things, but you can actually have them easily cycle through and adjust the height of the pendulum. And if you've got them marked out on those flags, they should be mostly accurate, and you don't have students that have to climb up on a ladder with a meter stick and try and measure them in situ. So it's up to you. But this allows you, because I have my students go through, there's a procedure that I have along with this where they alter the length of the pendulum, the mass of the pendulum bob, and also the amplitude. And so 200 is a nice mid-range value, and so that's one of the nice things about these clips. If you can't get it to hook on regularly, you can also open up the clip, feed it through there, and you know that this isn't going to pop off very easily either. You have one of the students hold it off on the side, and let's set this to 1.5 meters, and then have them pull it out. You can have one of the other students hold the meter stick like this, where they pull it out maybe 10 centimeters or so amplitude. Then I have a stopwatch. I always forget to mark the stopwatches, but as I've mentioned before, feel free to have your students use their cell phones. Many of your students will have cell phones. They will be stoked to actually be able to use them. Have a stopwatch app on there and have them keep track of that. Now the key on this is to have them let it go, and tell them this beforehand, but count up 10 full cycles and remind them that they're looking for a cycle when it returns to the point that it started at. So it isn't 1, 2, it's 1, 2. So have them let it go, record the time, 1, 2, 3, onwards to 10. Stop it at 10, and then take whatever number you get, 35 seconds, and divide that, if that happens to be what it is, I'm just guessing, and divide that by 10. So it takes 3.5 seconds for one complete cycle on this. Off the top of my head, that's what I'm guessing, although I could be wrong. You can have them adjust the height simply by pulling this. Now we're at 1 meter. 1, 2, 3, 2 meters. And again, I should be keeping this at about 10 centimeters, but you probably can't even see it down there anyway. That's the different lengths, which should be the only thing that has an influence on this, of course. And then the other thing that you can do, back in my instructions, I walk them through that, replace the 200 with a 100. And I usually keep them just at, say, 1.5 meters. In other words, 1.5 is kind of my mid-range. I have them, when they're adjusting the height, go to 1 meter and then go to 2 meters. And then for anything else, if they're changing the amplitude or the mass, I have them go back to 1.5 meters. In other words, emphasize changing only one variable at a time. But then have them try the different masses, see if that changes it. It won't, spoiler alert. And then 500 grams. And have them go through and measure those. You can also do the amplitude, have the students use the meter stick, and instead of coming out to 10, have them come out to 20 instead, or 30, right? And so you don't even need necessarily mathematical stuff on that, though it does give them a hint that the amplitude won't actually matter. But you can let them play around with that as much as you'd like, or maybe you've got a better way, maybe something on your tables, you can have it where it's right next to it, and they can easily draw it out. Unfortunately, when you do the different amplitude, or the different lengths, now you need the meter stick up here, so maybe you could rig something up that holds the meter stick. For me right now, it's not really worth the effort, so I usually tell them, okay, so about 10 centimeters, maybe 4 inches or so, and then on the next one, 2/3 of a feet, maybe 8 inches, that sort of thing. Use something where they can get a good ballpark for it. In the end, it shouldn't have any noticeable difference, except if they get noticeably outside, to high amplitudes, which I'm not going to do for fear that it'd be my luck with me running this together quickly, it flies at my camera. If they're at very high amplitude, then you may not get simple harmonic motion because it technically only applies under small displacements for a pendulum, because that's when you have the small angle approximation. So it should be at about 10 degrees or less. Although if you're dealing with 1.5 meters, if you're dealing with maybe 10 centimeters or so, you should be fine. The results thus far have been really good, and then you can tie in stuff with grandfather clocks and old timekeeping measurements, that sort of thing. The final thing that I want to bring up, and you'll see this in a couple of other videos as well, is how I actually get this up in the ceiling, because I have one of the drop ceilings, the panel ceilings like usual. I'm going to angle this up. And it's kind of hard to see what that is. Let's see if I can zoom in. Oops, give me just a moment. There we go. That's actually a binder clip. All right, here we are again. And that's the binder clip up on the drop ceiling there. I've got it on just one of the panels that the ceiling tile goes into. I'll zoom back out a little bit. Now, many places have tile ceiling just like this, so you should actually be able to use that pretty easily. It's been my experience that as long as you don't go over, say, 1 kilogram or so of weight, I haven't had any problems with the clip trying to pull off or do any damage to the ceiling. I'm not necessarily recommending that you do that yourself, because I don't want to be receiving the bill if your ceiling is manufactured differently, or you put too much on there, or the kids tear some of it up. But this has worked very well for me. If you have a problem with the clip actually slipping off, you can put some rubber bands around the binder clip itself so that it's got more friction there. But it seems to do pretty well. With this, especially for the pendulum one, I wouldn't recommend going above 500 grams just because, I don't know how much weight I can actually put on those safely, but I've put it up to maybe about 1 kilogram or 2, and it hasn't really had any problems, so I keep it as long as it's below 1 kilogram. But that's how I actually get it affixed to the ceiling.